Alrighty, make sure my slides are working here. Okay, so as the title indicates, we're going to be talking about stress tonight. So if you're familiar with what we do in the office, we talk a lot about stress. Our foundational philosophy is that your body was designed to function normally. All it does is adapt and respond to the environment and the stress that we put on it. So the symptoms that we may be feeling are just the adaptation to that stress. In the office, a lot of times we will use supplements, but supplements should never be the end all or the answer. Reason for that is if I give you a supplement and you feel great while you're taking it, that's awesome. But if I take it away from you and you start to feel terrible again, then what are we really doing? We didn't do anything different than the medical system. Instead of using a medication, I just used a supplement. So it's better. There may be less side effects, but at the end of the day, it's still the same thing, right? I'm still just treating your symptoms with a supplement. So that should never be the answer. The goal of supplements is just to bridge the gap between where we're at currently and where we're trying to go, to help get us there faster, to help make up the difference for certain environmental things that we can't change. And we'll talk about what that looks like tonight. But the goal of tonight's talk is I want to talk about lifestyle things that we can do to help manage the stresses in our life, whether it's physical, chemical, or emotional. Most of these are going to be either free or very low cost things that you can integrate right away to start making a difference in the way that you live your life. So before we talk about that, we just want to talk about what is stress. Everybody has like maybe a little bit different understanding of stress. We throw the word stress around all the time, but what does that actually mean? So according to the World Health Organization, stress can be defined as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Stress is a natural human response that prompts us to address challenges and threats in our lives. Everyone experiences stress to some degree. It's absolutely true. Stress can be good. If we don't have any stress in our life, there's no way for us to ever possibly grow, adapt, change, anything like that. If you look at the National Cancer Institute, they define stress as the body's response to physical, mental, or emotional pressure. So right there, it can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be mental. Those mental processes actually do cause chemical changes in the body that can raise blood pressure, increase heart rate, elevate blood sugar levels. It may also lead to feelings of frustration, anxiety, anger, or depression. How many people have ever felt frustration, anger, anxiety? If your hand's not up, it just means you're a liar. And stress can be caused by normal life activities or by an event such as a trauma or an illness. Long-term stress or high levels of stress may actually lead to mental and physical health problems. And so yes, that mental stress that you feel on a daily basis can actually cause physical problems. And we see that all the time in the office. So our definition, stress is a physical or psychological stimulus that can produce mental or physiological reactions that may lead to illness. Technically speaking, stress is a disruption of homeostasis or balance within the body, which may be triggered by alarming experiences which are either real or imaginary. How many people know someone in their life? You don't have to call yourself out, but if you know someone else in your life that has imaginary things that they stress about all the time. Guys, raise your hands if you know a female. And stress can be physical, chemical, or emotional. In chiropractic philosophy, we call those the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So what is stress? Well, the very basic stress response is the fight or flight. We've all heard of fight or flight before. So if we think back to primitive times, the fight or flight response, and the reason we call that is because if we're faced with a threat in our life, we have 2 options. We can either fight or we can run away, or we can freeze and do nothing. But people who froze and did nothing back in the old days, their genes did not multiply to get to this point. So we're either fighting or we're flighting, or fighting or, running away. So if you think about everything that has to happen for the stress response to take place, if we go back to running from a lion, think about what has to happen in order for me to run away from a lion. I've got to increase my blood sugar levels so that I can get blood sugar into my body. I've got to increase blood pressure so that I can get blood pumping through my body faster. We're going to be redirecting all of that blood flow to my legs, my arms, things like that, redirecting blood flow away from internal organs. And this is all a normal adaptive response. My body is adapting so that I don't get eaten by a lion. We'll also see things like the hair on our arms and legs start to stand up. Our pupils are going to dilate. Our breath is going to shorten. We're going to breathe faster. Our heart rate's going to increase. So there's a lot of stress responses, and these are all adaptive to help us get away from the threat. Once we've gotten away from the threat, we've climbed up into a tree or something, the lion's no longer chasing us, our body goes back to normal. And that's the key with the way that that fight or flight response is supposed to work, is that we're supposed to get away from the threat, and then we're supposed to go back to normal. The problem is that nowadays, the threats are everywhere, They're in our heads. We wake up and immediately are faced with a threat. So we live our whole life in this fight or flight state. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to identify what those threats are, where they're coming from, and then how to either move or design our life in a way that we don't have those same threats, or how to do things to kind of manage our body so the threats aren't having as much of an effect on us. So if we look at what that cortisol response, or the stress response, actually looks like in the body, there's three major hormones that are going to play a role. All these hormones are produced in a tiny little gland that sits on top of your kidney called your adrenal glands. And so we're not trying to get into a science lesson. This is not that important, but cortisol is going to be the main stress hormone that we talk about when we're testing for stress hormones in blood, urine, things like that. The main thing we're looking at is cortisol. So most people are going to be familiar with that. The job of cortisol mainly is to increase blood sugar, increase bone resorption. It's going to actually suppress the immune response. It's going to increase our energy, and it's going to decrease our insulin secretion from the pancreas. So all we're doing is modulating our blood sugar response, modulating our body's physiology so that we can get energy to where we need to get energy to so we can get away. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are going to work in very similar ways. They're going to be focused more on heart rate, on increasing blood pressure, redirecting blood flow, increasing bronchodilation, so opening up the lungs so we can get more oxygen into the body, increasing our senses, that's pupillary dilation, so we can get a better understanding of what's around us, decreasing pain sensation, slowing digestion, things like that. If I'm about to get eaten by a lion, my body cares more about getting away from the lion than it does digesting my last meal. So we've got our adrenal glands. They look like these little hats. They sit right on top of the kidney right here. Your adrenal glands are responsible for a lot of production of a lot of hormones. As you can see, we've got cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. The other one that we have up here that plays a role for a lot of females when they start going through menopause is estrogens and testosterone. The problem there, we don't need to get super into that. I think Dr. Rachel talks about that in her hormone talk, so you guys can go learn all about that from her. But if we've constantly been abusing our adrenal glands and forcing them to pump out all these stress hormones, by the time we get into menopause, when we need our adrenal glands to produce our sex hormones, they can't do it. And so we end up storing fat. We end up feeling terrible because our estrogens just tank. So there's a lot of young women in the room, which is awesome. So start doing these things now so that you don't have to be sitting across from Dr. Rachel when you're in your 50s feeling terrible. So stress is also cumulative. So the way that I like to just explain stress is kind of like a bucket. And a lot of people come in and they say, you know, think about the lower back, for example. People bend over to tie their shoes one day, something they've done their whole life, and all of a sudden, just like that, their back goes out of place and they can't walk for a week. It's like, why was bending over, why did that cause my back to go out like that? Well, it wasn't you bending over right now. It's all the physical stress that's built up in your life. And so all those stresses in your life, whether they're physical, chemical, or emotional, are all kind of like drops in the bucket. And the symptoms that we experience are going to be what happens when that bucket starts overflowing, essentially. So when you look at what those stresses are, they can be relationships, they can be finances, work, food intolerances or food allergies, accidents, injuries, traumas, repetitive movements, posture, being a caretaker for people, struggling with school, things like that. Those are all going to be stresses. And then we've got things that we do on a daily basis that help to deal with that and manage that stress. So we've got exercise, we've got meditation, cold plunging, infrared sauna, getting healthy sleep, working on personal growth, getting adjusted. All of those things are managing the stress. Now, the problem is a lot of times we're going to be doing things to help manage stress that are in fact a stress. Perfect example is I had a woman sitting across from me a couple months ago, and she told me she ran 7 to 10 miles every single morning. 7 to 10 miles, 7 days a week, that's a lot of stress on the body. That's a huge physical stress. Now, she told me what happens is if she stops running, and she knew exactly where we were going. When I said, wow, that's a lot of running, she was like, you better not tell me to stop running. The problem is if she doesn't run that much every single day, her brain goes crazy. So she's using a physical stress of running to deal with an emotional or a mental stress. And the problem is, yeah, you don't feel overwhelmed mentally, but what are we doing? We're just recirculating back into our stress bucket. And that's why she ended up sitting across from me, because she's dealing with all the same symptoms. It's just that her coping mechanism is not healthy. So we're going to talk about today how we can make sure that we're doing healthy coping mechanisms, make sure that we're draining the bucket appropriately, and making sure that we aren't continuing to fill that bucket. Because I can't help you if you're filling the bucket faster than I can try to drain it. And so when we talk about supplements, we have supplements that can drain the bucket faster. We've got supplements that can stop the rain up top. But the supplements can only do so much, because if it's still raining and I close the umbrella, we're going to get soaking wet again. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today, is what type of strategies can we start to implement in our lives to help from a foundational level. So can stress be good? How many people think stress can be a good thing? See all the chiropractors raising their hand. Good answer. I think everybody's just following what my hand's doing. But yes, stress can be a good thing. And this is where we're going to start to differentiate between acute and chronic stress. So when I was very early on in my career taking exercise physiology classes, one of the foundational principles in exercise physiology is called the SAID principle. This is the specific adaptation to opposed or implied demand. Basically what this just says is that your body will adapt and respond in response to stress. Now, the way that this is applied in exercise physiology is typically with going to the gym and doing strength training. If I go and I do 100 curls well, not 100 because that's too much stress, right? But if I go in my workout, I'm going to get stronger. So the weight is a stress on my body. I worked out appropriately. I gave my body rest. And then I went back and I did the same weight again. Eventually, that weight's going to seem super easy. And the reason that that same weight starts to seem super easy is because my body was able to adapt to that weight. Now, if I go and I try to do 1,000 pull-ups and my body's not conditioned to do that, anybody know what's going to happen to me? There's a disease that can kill you called rhabdo. Rhabdomyolysis is basically where you break down all your muscles. It creates a bunch of toxins and it shuts your body down. People have died from that. A lot of college athletes whose coaches push them too far, or they try to push themselves too far to make a team or something like that. You can get very, very sick. I had a patient who's in the hospital for almost 10 days because he gave himself rhabdo. So don't do that. That's a perfect example of a normal stress that should be healthy and you overdo it. So too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. But the SAID principle doesn't just apply in the gym. It applies to everything. Any situation that you go into that makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, that's your body or your brain telling you that being uncomfortable is how we grow, right? So we're going to adapt and respond. If you have to do something once, it may seem uncomfortable. You continue putting yourself in that situation. That same stress is not going to make you feel uncomfortable anymore because your body's adapted to it. So think about, if we want to grow, we've got to put our bodies through stress. So what are we doing that's putting good, healthy stress on our body on a daily basis that's helping us grow? We'll talk about that more a little bit at the end. So what are good stretches? Good stresses. So we've got physical, chemical, and emotional stresses. Good stress is going to be exercising in a way that's constantly varied. We're working multiple energy systems when we're doing it. I've got a bunch of slides on exercise. I'm not going to talk too much about that. So those are all good physical stresses. Getting adjusted is a stress into the body, but it's a healthy stress that's going to help you. Chemical stresses. I really tried hard to think of a lot of really good, healthy chemical stresses. I couldn't really do it. So I came up with whole foods, clean air, and water. We're putting things into our body. Technically, food is a chemical. Technically, whatever. Those are good things for the body. We need those. Too much water, can it kill you? Yes. So again, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And then emotional stresses. So this is doing things that are hard, doing things that make you feel uncomfortable. Pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, obviously in a safe and in controlled manner. But if you can push yourself outside your comfort zone on a regular basis, you're going to end up growing to meet that demand. So when is stress bad? If we go back to our lion analogy, stress is bad when you wake up and the lion's right there in bed with you. So this is AI. I just went into Canva and I typed in, put a scary looking lion in a bed. I tried to have it add me next to it, but Canva didn't know what was going on. So it's when we wake up, we've got the kids that are screaming, we've got to go to work, the husband's running out the door and he's not helping us, we get in traffic and we're honking and yelling at people, we get to work, our boss hates us, we're overwhelmed, there's not enough staff. We could go on, right? So that's when stress is not good because it never goes away. So let's talk about where it comes from. And back to our chiropractic principles and philosophies, we've got the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So traumas, these are all the physical stresses in our lives. And this goes back to the guy who bends over, throws his back out. It's not the one time he bent over to tie his shoes. It's all of these other things that have happened. Kids fall thousands of times a year. We're young, our bodies are pliable, they're adaptable, but small changes that occur from a fall when you're young can create bigger impacts later on in life. Car accidents, carrying a heavy backpack around all day long, falling asleep on the couch, hunched over playing video games, looking at your phone, trying to carry 1,000 pounds of groceries in one arm while the other arm can get the keys to get you inside, sports accidents, injuries. So all these physical stresses, again, are cumulative within the body. They build up, and it's the one small thing you do that throws everything out of whack because we never did anything to address the physical traumas within our life. We look at chemical stresses. We've got the amalgam fillings, things like heavy metals that are put in the body and fillings, air pollution, water pollution, food pollution, the cosmetics and things that you put on your skin. There's 1,500 chemicals that are banned in the EU, and the list I can count on both my hands of the amount of chemicals that are banned in the United States. So there's things that we're putting on our skin that are getting absorbed directly into our bloodstream. That's a chemical stress. The poison that they're putting in cans and calling food is chemical stress. The environment, the pesticides on our food, the antibiotics in our food. Again, food's a huge source of chemical stress on the body if we're not eating proper things. And again, all of this is cumulative. So chemical stress like this can create physical stress. Physical stress from getting in a car accident can create physiological issues. So this is why if we really want to understand what's going on, we've got to start to figure out where the triggers are that the stress is coming from and make sure that we're not still doing things that are hurting our body while we're trying to fix our body. So how do we test for stress? We can actually test for cortisol. How many people have had a cortisol test done at some point in their life? Yeah, some people in the room. So what that looks like is a nice little graph like this. Now, cortisol, again, is the hormone that kind of gives us energy, gets us going, increases blood sugar, things like that. We have to have cortisol. We have to have epinephrine, norepinephrine. Those are normal things to have in our body. Again, it's too much of them that create problems, or too much for too long that leads to no production. Both of those cause problems. So this is a awakening response. So cortisol levels are right here in the middle. So when you wake up, it's going to be a little bit lower. It should increase a couple hours and max out a couple hours after you wake up. And it's going to gradually start to dip down towards the end of the day, and we're going to be able to fall asleep. And if this is what your cortisol pattern looks like, now they're a little bit on the higher end, but somewhere in between these ranges, you're typically going to feel okay. The problem is when that cortisol pattern starts to get disrupted. So we look at people who are under really, really high levels of stress. Those types of people are going to be slammed up all the way against the top all day long. So this is an acute stress that the person's just dealing with stress all day long. This is the mom who's dealing with screaming kids and the husband who doesn't take care of her and all the stuff. People who go to work and they're stressed out every day. This person is completely maxed out on their adrenal glands. What happens is if we stay like this for too long, we end up depleting our stress responses. And we end up like this person right here, who is fine when they wake up and immediately they crash and they stay with no energy all day long. And a lot of times we describe these people as wired but tired, where they're so tired they literally just can't fall asleep at night. So this person has no energy at all day long. They feel terrible. Then we look at the people who feel okay in the morning and then immediately crash in the afternoon. So that's someone like this, where their stress hormones, they're okay, and then immediately they come down and they crash in the afternoon. This same person who works out in the morning, we'll talk about the effect of exercise on cortisol. So this is the same person, not the same person, but the same situation. But this person exercised, they increased their cortisol, they feel great. She feels amazing for the first 4 hours of the day. And then she crashes and has zero energy for the rest of the day. And that's kind of what that looks like. So getting tested is really the best way to understand where you're at with that cortisol stress response there. Once we know where you're at, then we can start to do things to deal with that. We talk about how to deal with stress here. I already kind of talked about the first step we have to do is deal with the stress ins. Because again, I can't help you if you're completely overwhelmed with stress and it doesn't ever stop. It's like standing outside in a hurricane with an umbrella. Might help a little bit, but it's not going to help for very long. And again, as soon as we take it away, you're going to get soaking wet. So step one is we've got to really start addressing, number one, where the stress is coming from, and then how can we work to reduce that burden of stress on our body. And then we can look at step number two, how can we set our lifestyle up to, number one, support a normal, healthy stress response, and make sure that we're dealing with our stressors appropriately. Because the reality is you can't avoid every stress in your life. There's always going to be some stress on your body. We've just got to learn to have healthy outlets that can help support that stress and support your goals. Perfect example, I like training for triathlons. It's not healthy. It's not good for you. No one should ever train for an Ironman, but a lot of people like to do it. And they're not going to listen to you if you tell them not to do it. So we know there's going to be a big stress over here. So we just got to be really diligent about doing a bunch of stuff over on this side to make sure that that stress is not having super negative impacts on their health. So let's talk about the first thing here. So first thing that can help drop down a lot of those emotional stresses is breathwork, meditation, mindfulness, journaling, all those types of things. The people who generally feel the best and have the most energy and are the happiest, one thing a lot of them have in common is they wake up early in the morning and their first couple hour or first half hour, first hour, 10 minutes of the day, they spend with themselves, with their thoughts, journaling, praying, reading, meditating, doing something. So talk about breath work. One of the best things that you can do with breath work is Wim Hof breathing. And so I'm not going to show you guys Wim Hof breathing, but there's a link right there. All I did was I typed in Wim Hof breathing into YouTube, and there's tons of videos that will guide you through what that process looks like. They've got timers, they talk, they do the whole thing. You can close your eyes and just listen to the video. Same thing with meditation videos. If you go to YouTube and you type in 10-minute meditation, you're going to get 1,000 different videos of people giving you meditations. Find one that works for you, because the meditation video that makes me feel relaxed may not make you feel relaxed, right? Next one is having a tool in your pocket that you can use when you get cut off in traffic or you're late to work and you just need to have a little bit of a refresh. So there's actually a breathing method that you can use that takes 30 seconds that will help to throw you back into that parasympathetic state. So basically all you do is you breathe through your nose for 3 seconds. You take a really deep inhale through your nose at the top of the breath, and then you slowly let it out. And what that looks like is do that 3 or 4 times, and it will be amazing how relaxed you feel. And I'm a data junkie. I like to keep track of things. So when I was riding my bike one time, I can see my cadence, I can see my power output, I can see my speed. So I can control the amount of effort that I'm putting out, and I can also see my heart rate. So we were riding right down Lakewood Ranch Boulevard here towards Fruitville. One of my buddies pulled up behind me and he asked me what my heart rate is. And my heart rate's always super high when I'm riding because I'm young. I ride with a bunch of old guys and their heart rates are always super low. He was like 135. I was like, my heart rate's at 155 right now. He's like, how are you not dying? So I was like, I'm going to try this. So we're all going the same speed, same energy, same cadence. And I tried that breath work and immediately watched my heart rate start to decline on my bike computer. I was able to bring my heart rate down 8 beats per minute just by changing my breathing. Now, I wasn't really getting enough oxygen. I wasn't comfortable breathing like that to be able to keep going. But regardless of whether you're an athlete and you're trying to go for longer by having a lower heart rate, it makes an immediate difference. And using heart rate is a really cool tool that you can use to bring it down. I've done the same thing just sitting on my watch, and I've just looked at where my watch is at, take a couple breaths normal, and then I do that breathing technique, and I can watch my heart rate drop by a couple beats a minute just on my watch here. So it really works. And that's a great thing to be able to do if your boss walks into your office and yells at you and you just need to take a breath. If you've had a stressful day before you walk into the house so you don't go piss off your spouse and your kids, reset yourself. The other thing is nose breathing. So part of that sympathetic response, short, shallow breaths all coming through the mouth. Nose breathing helps to activate the sympathetic nerve or the parasympathetic nervous system. One tool that you can use to encourage nose breathing is actually just put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. You can't do that and breathe through your mouth at the same time. It's going to help encourage breathing through the nose. Breathing through your nose while you're sleeping is also really good. Sleeping is unfortunately an unconscious event that we don't have control over. So that's where mouth tape comes into play. I've never done it personally because I don't want to rip my beard off. But I know people who have done the mouth taping and they feel amazing when they wake up the next morning because they're breathing through their nose. Also really good at protecting your oral bacteria, good for gut health, all that stuff as well. And then the other thing is just building this type of stuff into a routine. Meditation, same sort of stuff, schedule time for it. The people who do the best mentally are the people who schedule time for themselves. We've all heard the adage, you can't pour from an empty cup, and it's so true, which is why ourselves, we should be at the top of our priority list. Everything else should come after we've taken care of our own self. So make sure you're taking time to do this stuff first thing in the morning. If it's the first thing you do every day, you can't forget to do it. If you say, oh, I'll write in my journal before I go to bed at night, your entire day has already happened, and then you're going to forget to do it. You're going to be too tired. Something else is going to come up, and then you're going to be the person who just has 1,000 excuses for why they're not doing anything to help themselves. So wake up 10 minutes earlier, set a timer, put your journal next to your bed, do what you need to do to make sure that this is your priority every single day. So this type of a person will benefit tremendously from doing something here that helps prevent that cortisol spike first thing in the morning. They also, their highest cortisol level compared to normal is actually in the afternoon. So that person would also benefit from doing it at lunch. So these are things that you can't, it's not you just have to do it once, right? You can do this as many times throughout the day as you want. For someone who's just living in that hyper stressed out state, do this stuff throughout the day. Bring yourself down. If you find yourself getting riled up, take a couple minutes for yourself, calm back down. It'll pay big, big dividends. What are we doing? All right, let's talk about some other stuff that we can do. Infrared sauna. How many people have been in an infrared sauna before? Couple? All right, we have one right there. No excuses. You guys can use it. Infrared sauna is great for a lot of reasons. One of the awesome reasons that kind of goes with what we just talked about is infrared sauna will actually activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So when we get parasympathetic nervous system is kind of like our brake for the sympathetic nervous system. If the parasympathetic nervous system is not being activated, our sympathetic nervous system will take over. So we've got to do things that are activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's not just about calming down the fight or flight response, it's about activating our rest and digest response. So that's where breathwork can help to do that, prayer can help to do that, infrared sauna can also help to do that. Now, what's the other nice thing about infrared sauna? You're trapped in a box by yourself for 30 to 45 minutes. What can you do in there for 30 to 45 minutes? Meditation, breath work. Probably don't want to take a journal in there with you because you'll sweat all over it. What's one of the other things that we talked about? Not just the mental stress, but the chemical stress. So people who have had years of chemical stress, people who have mold toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, we've got to get that stuff out of the body. We've got to first make sure that we're not continuing to put it in the body, but then we've got to get rid of it also. So infrared saunas are going to help with detox. Now it's a lower level heat. The infrared light's actually going to penetrate into your skin. It's kind of like a microwave. It's going to warm you up from the inside. And by doing that, you're actually going to have more toxins that are released into your sweat than if you just went into a high heat sauna. So there's a ton of really good benefits. It's going to increase immune function, increase cardiovascular function. But again, it's really good time for mindfulness. And again, here they talk about infrared sauna helping to people with adrenal exhaustion and parasympathetic dominance. One thing I will note is the only proven way to fix adrenal fatigue is to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and come out of that fight or flight response. Our bodies were designed to heal. They can heal. We just have to put them in the position where they're able to heal. How about chiropractic care? Chiropractic care is also awesome for helping to take you out of the fight or flight state. It can be very relaxing. A lot of people carry their emotions in their shoulders. They carry it in their mid-back. We all know where we carry our stress at. Getting adjusted is a really great way to release that stress. It also helps your body deal with physical stress. If I go and fall and twist my spine, what's going to happen if I don't untwist it, right? It's a really crude way of saying it, but all those physical stress, our body adapts and responds and compensates to that. So if we're not doing anything to make sure that we're good physically, then we can end up with more physical dysfunction. It can improve the immune function, and the most important thing it does is help with nervous system activation. And your parasympathetic response and your sympathetic response are both nervous system driven responses. So if we can help to activate certain parts of your nervous system, for example, we have sympathetic chains and parasympathetic chains. They're nerves that come out of certain parts of our spine. Our cervical spine, tons of sympathetic nerves right there. Our thoracic spine, lots of parasympathetic nerves. So getting adjusted, if we carry all of our stress here and we're shutting down that parasympathetic nerve supply, how's that going to help the rest of our body? So all super important things. So those are all things that we can do to help with step number 1, decreasing stress. Let's talk about things we can do for step number 2 now. Exercise. Exercise is a really big one. How many people try to exercise, but they don't know where to start or they get overwhelmed? I'm that person. So exercise can be used to help manage our stress if we're doing it in a healthy way. But exercise can also be used to manipulate and modulate our cortisol response, because exercise is an acute response. We are going to create an acute cortisol response. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a couple slides. We're going to go through some cortisol patterns, and we're going to do a little question answer. You guys are going to tell me where somebody should be exercising at in the day based on where the cortisol levels are at. Exercise also is going to improve your ability to sleep. It's a great outlet for mental stress. If we look at just what a basic weekly routine should look like, with no specific goal in mind, just in general, 2 to 3 days a week of strength training, 1 to 2 days a week of high intensity training. And these can be combined together. Also, they don't have to be separate days. And then about 2.5 hours or so of physical activity. So for this example, physical activity is anything where you're increasing above your normal resting heart rate, but staying below a conversational pace. So if you go out for a walk and you're having a conversation with a friend, not really exercise, it's kind of exercise, it's more physical activity. But that's super, super important. We need to have physical activity. So 180 minutes of physical activity, a couple days of that, getting our heart rate above conversational pace. And for a lot of people, they don't have time to work out every single day. So then we look at strategies for how can we combine this together. A lot of people that I work with come in and they go for walks every day, which is great. But are we getting either one of these when we're going for a walk? No. So what can we then do during the walk that's going to help get into some of those different energy systems? Well, we can go for a 5-minute jog. We're going to increase the heart rate up. We can do 15 or 20 air squats. That's going to increase the heart rate up. We can walk in an area that has like the little exercise equipment, like sitting around on the track, and we can start to use some of those things. So there's ways that we can, so I say high intensity interval training. It's not CrossFit. It's something where we're increasing our heart rate and then bringing it back down. So it's all about finding something that works for you. Strength training is super important, but you don't have to have a gym membership to do strength training. You can do body weight training. You can use bands at home. You can get really light weights. We just need to do something that's activating and engaging the muscles. And we should be doing different types of things, that different sets and durations. Again, we can dive much more into what this looks like based on your specific goals. If my goal is to go win a powerlifting competition, probably not going to be able to go for a 5-mile walk and do push-ups and call it a day, right? But if my goal is just to be healthy, avoid osteoporosis, things like that, then I can incorporate some of these body weight things into my normal walk, and that's going to definitely have a big impact and a big help. One of the other things that we can do to get around strength training, shouldn't say get around, but using the vibe plates like we have in the back, one of the big reasons that strength training is super good for your bones is because we're pulling on the bone. And if we go back to our SAID principle, when we talk about bones, it's called Wolfe's Law. It's my favorite law. It's my last name. But what that says is that if I pull on a bone or put a constant stress on the bone, my body's going to lay down more bone to help strengthen it. That's why we get degeneration, because we're constantly putting stress on the bone. We lay down more bone spurs, things like that form as a result of that stress. So strength training, we're pulling on the bones. We're stimulating them to continue laying down bones, so we're not going to go into that osteoporotic state where we're losing bone mass. Vibe plates were invented by NASA because what happens when we pull on a bone, we pull on that outer layer of the bone. It's only a single cell layer thick, and that's what stimulates the bone, basically lay down more bone. The vibration from those vibe plates actually stimulates that bone, that outer layer of bone, the same way that strength training does. So for a lot of people who can't move well enough to do strength training, don't have the time, the resources, they can use the vibe plates. That vibration technology was invented by NASA because astronauts would come back from space with no bone density left because they had no gravity, nothing pulling on the bones. So they were able to stand on the plates, or whatever strapped themselves to the plates, and it prevented that bone loss. So really cool stuff. There's a lot of really beneficial things about Vibe plates. A lot of people put those in their homes because it's easy. They can stand on it for 20 to 30 minutes a day, and they're going to prevent that osteoporosis. How about people who just don't have time to work out? One of the big things is that holds people back a lot of times is they don't think they have 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour to go to the gym. They don't want to get sweaty in the middle of the day, whatever. Exercise is cumulative. It doesn't have to be all done at the same time. So one of my favorite things I heard on a podcast was exercise snacks. And just like a snack, it's a small meal. What are you laughing about, Christy? I'm going to make you come up here and demonstrate.
You do this every so often with our morning meetings.
Yeah, when you guys are low cortisol. Yeah, exercise snacks. So this is just a small movement that you can get up, you can do, and go back to your life. And if you do it a couple times throughout the day, every day, over the course of a year, over the course of 5 years, it's going to make a significant difference. So small movements, things like air squats, sit-ups, jumping jacks, push-ups. You'll also notice that that's enough to create a cortisol spike, and our energy is going to be way better. I'm not going to do it because I'm nice, but if I made everybody stand up and do 15 jumping jacks, you're going to start laughing. It's going to increase your mood, and you're also going to be way more focused on me for the rest of the talk. So maybe I should make you guys do jumping jacks. But no, so doing this throughout the day is really helpful. People who travel a lot, people with busy schedules, just do something. Get movement in your day. That's really the takeaway. It looks like I jumped ahead of my slides here. Interval training, walking is great physical activity. Add in an exercise snack into your walk. Get your buddy to go out with you. Hey, you want to go for a walk and get some snacks? You're going to get friends to go with you. Good conversation, good for your mental health. So the key there is just get above a conversational pace. That's the biggest thing. You stressed out? Okay, and then how to be successful with this. Make it easy. Make it fun. Take the guesswork out of it, which a lot of times means getting a workout program, getting a personal trainer, set a goal. We have SMART goals that we talk about. So a goal has to be specific, measurable. Oh God, do you know? Attainable, realistic, and in a time specific. I knew you guys were all smart. Good work. So don't just set a goal with no timeline, with no way to actually measure your progress. Set a specific goal and then tell somebody about your goal. A goal inside your head is a thought. It's nothing. It's not a goal until you write it down, and it's not going to be that actionable unless you tell somebody else about it. So get an accountability partner. And a lot of times I tell them accountability partner means you're going to go to the gym and you're going to pay money for a trainer, because now you're putting money behind it. So you're giving yourself a financial incentive to stay with it. For a long time, I went to workout classes because I lost my interest in going to the gym. All I had to do was show up. And then you just show up, and then you don't have to stay motivated during the class because you got other people doing it with you. You can't just leave in the middle of a workout class, right? So find a way to make it fun, make it easy, take the guesswork out of it, and then have some sort of accountability with it. So let's talk about what we should be doing with exercise in specific situations. So this is our person with a normal stress response. Can you guys see this in the back? Kind of, a little bit? No? All right, whatever. We're right in the middle of the range here. Who wants to take a guess at when we should be working out here? Whenever you want. Yeah, for the most part. Now we can talk about stress and working out late and its effect on sleep and things like that. This type of a person, we're good with stress. So we don't really have to worry about it. We're not trying to manipulate anything through exercise. Just get it in at this point in time. Let's talk about someone here. This is someone who's crazy stressed out all the time. When should they be working out? I didn't really talk about it. What type of exercise do you think is probably going to be best for them? Exercise snacks, maybe, where we're not creating a huge cortisol spike all at once. More physical activity, yoga. You gonna say something? No? Walking? Yeah. So lower level, don't get super high, don't get super intense. Now, kind of a two-way street, because if we do super intense exercise, we're gonna spike our cortisol. and then it's going to reset to a lower level. So that may be helpful for them as well. But what we don't want to be doing is doing a bunch of exercise back in here at the end of the day. So let's keep our exercise light. Let's keep it like more flowy, more gentle, and let's keep it at the beginning of the day. How about someone who is chronically adrenal fatigued here? When do you think they should be doing their exercise? Again, we're going to be creating a cortisol spike. So this is where we can use certain tools to manipulate our cortisol levels. So this is where they're the lowest, and they should be the highest. This would be a great time to do your exercise, or an hour before you get to the lowest point of your day, before you lose energy, drive, motivation. So this type of person is going to struggle with energy in the morning, and they're going to struggle to get out of bed. But if you force them to do exercise, they're probably going to feel better the whole rest of the day. How about this person? Great cortisol levels, and then they come crashing down in the afternoon. Yeah, work out in the afternoon. Do some snacks in the afternoon, because we're great on cortisol here, but now when we crash, we can actually use our exercise to manipulate this to bring that cortisol level up a little bit here. You don't want to do it too close to bed to where we can't sleep, but going for a workout over lunch is probably going to support them better than going for a workout first thing in the morning. This is my patient I saw earlier this week. She works out first thing in the morning. And I was like, stop working out first thing in the morning. Work out in the afternoon. It makes sense. Her schedule's not going to allow her to do that. So what do you think I recommended? Snacks. Do some snacks at lunch. Let's try to do something to bring that cortisol level up. All right. How about eating habits? Biggest mistake that I see people do is, what do you think it is? Too much or too little food? Not enough food. So talk about, are you eating enough food? Are you eating the right food? When are you eating your food? And does your eating habit support the goals that you're trying to attain? So for a lot of you guys that were at my last talk at the beginning of February, I talked about this for an hour. I would encourage you to go back and watch that, because I'm not going to talk about it for an hour today. But we're going to rip through some of the slides here. So this is where we can understand our glucose levels, or our blood sugar levels, and use certain things to modulate that throughout the day to help with energy, stress, and make sure that we're not putting ourselves into more of a depleted and a stressed out state. So this right here, this little line indicates what your blood sugar should look like around baseline, normal blood sugar. I don't necessarily agree with, well, during the day, 80 to 110, good, healthy blood sugar levels. It fluctuates throughout the day. When we eat, our blood sugar is going to spike right away. We're going to create an insulin response. If we have the appropriate insulin response, we're going to come back into the normal range and live happily ever after. If we have too much of an insulin response, we're going to dip down. That's what this slide shows. Glucose, blood sugar response, insulin response mirrors it. We look good. Everything's good. Too many carbohydrates, too much sugar, too high of a glycemic index. Blood sugar goes up even higher. Insulin overcompensates. And then we get this dip called reactive hypoglycemia. This is stress. This will create a cortisol response. This will put more stress on your body. So let's talk about understanding how to eat around exercise. I think that's what I want to talk about next, because I don't think I have a slide for that. So if we look at what our normal looks like, when we eat food or when we increase blood sugar, we have two options. We can either create an insulin response. Insulin's going to unlock the cells so that we can bring the blood sugar into the cells. Ideally, we're moving and we're using that sugar for energy. If not, it gets stored as fat. Cortisol can also do the same thing. It increases sugar. And then if we're not moving and utilizing it, it gets stored. So let's talk about eating in response to exercise. So exercise is going to create an acute stress response. With an acute stress response, blood sugar is going to do what? Elevate. So that's actually a good thing that our blood sugar is spiking like that. If it doesn't, we're not going to have the energy in our muscles to work out. What happens afterwards is the muscles have gone through their muscle glycogen, which is the stored energy in the muscles. They've pulled a lot of that sugar in to make up the difference in energy. And then we get the same sort of thing we talked about before, is we get hypoglycemia that happens after exercise. What did we talk about right here? This is stress, basically. So now we just exercised and we induced stress. So let's talk about how we can manage that. If we're starting here and we exercise and pull all that blood sugar into the muscles, we're going to drop super low and we're going to create a big deficit. If we eat beforehand, we're going to create less of a deficit. And if we eat right afterwards, now we're going to bring ourselves right back out of that. So when we talk about timing our food intake, the best time to eat simple carbohydrates is right before and right after exercise. Why? Because we want to work on manipulating this to keep ourselves in as balanced of a state as possible. Increase our blood sugar here by eating something that's going to get absorbed fast. We know we're going to create a deficit, so then let's eat something right after to fill that deficit. What happens is a lot of times people go working out early morning when they're fasted. They don't have, that's when your blood sugar is the lowest, is when you're fasted. Then we go work out and we create a huge deficit. Then we drive home, we get home, we skip our breakfast, and now we just created a situation where we're in a huge blood sugar deficit all day long. And what do we have to do if we're not eating to increase our blood sugar? Got to increase our cortisol. It's a stress response. So now we just put stress on our body because we didn't eat the appropriate type of food at the appropriate time. So if we know that, then we can time our meals to eat appropriately. A lot of people talk about taking protein shakes right after a workout. Problem with that is that protein has a transit time in the stomach of about 2 to 4 hours, meaning that huge protein shake that you chug down 45 minutes after a workout, it's just sitting in your stomach. It's not getting absorbed, digested, and utilized. The protein that you're using to rebuild your muscle tissue, it's already stored in your body in amino acid pools, right? So if you're going to do any of that type of stuff, amino acids during an exercise that can get absorbed right away, you can utilize those. But the best time to eat a big protein meal, 2 to 3 hours before workout. Why? Because we want it to get through the stomach so we can actually use it. So it makes sense when we think about what's happening physiologically, but there's a bunch of junk out there on the internet with people trying to sell you supplements and tell you what to do who don't actually know what's happening in your body. So from a pure, let's avoid the stress response, we need to make sure that we're fueling appropriately. Now, that's also based on your goal. That's with the goal of limiting stress and with the goal of building muscle, maximizing our muscle recovery. What if our goal is to lose weight? Let me rephrase that. If our goal is to lose weight and we have healthy cortisol levels, then what we can do is we can fast after a workout, knowing we're in that hypoglycemic state. The body's going to create a cortisol response, which is fine because our adrenal glands are healthy. And then we're going to start pulling from fat to convert fat into sugar to fill the void. This is where it gets a little bit complicated, but when you understand the physiology of what's happening, this is going to be recorded also, so you can go back and you can rewatch this. Working within your goals. Someone who's completely flatlined, here, they can't produce cortisol. So what's going to happen if they fast after a workout? They're screwed, and they're going to feel like shit all day long. So don't do that. Let's be smart about what we're eating and when we're eating it. That goes back to kind of timing eating. Being in a fasted state is technically a stress response on the body. In my last talk, I talked about intermittent fasting and who should be intermittent fasting and stuff. Guys, we deal with stress a lot better than females. Sorry, that's just the way it is. Guys can generally intermittent fast all day long and be fine. Women, we need to be really careful with when we're intermittent fasting. And we'll talk about what that should look like based on some stress stuff later. But not eating enough food is a huge thing that holds a lot of women back from being able to rebuild their body. And no, Dr. Rachel dealt with this personally. She can tell you afterwards her adrenal glands, her stuff went from being completely flatlined to a normal, healthy adrenal response. And one of the big things was she wasn't eating enough. So she was putting a chemical or a physiological stress on our body by not eating enough food. So let's talk about how much food to eat. let's really quickly talk about how much food to eat, because I went into this in a lot more detail in my previous talk. So you can go back and watch that talk. I'll make sure that there's a way to find that talk easily. A couple different factors. We've got to look at the thermal effect of food, which is how much energy it actually takes for your food to be broken down and utilized. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, also known as NEAT. This is all the energy it takes for you to live your life above existing. So anything between existing and exercise, that gap is called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Our basal metabolic rate is how much energy does it take to exist, and exercise makes up a very small portion of that, but that's where you have the most control of your caloric expenditure, is in your exercise. This stuff can be pretty easily calculated, so I'll talk about how to do that here. So how many calories do I need? Well, my BMR, about 65% of your daily calorie intake, plus your energy, plus your TEF, which is the thermal effect of food, plus your NEAT. I did this for myself, and I calculated a couple different types of exercise. So this is because I track all my stuff on my watch. So this is how many calories I burned doing these activities. 18 holes of golf, 700 to 800 calories. Running a half marathon, 1,400 calories. A 4-mile run, 500 calories. And a 45-minute strength training session, 250 to 300 calories. Based on that, if I were to, and this is, if I were to play 18 holes of golf and go for a 4-mile run, which is not uncommon on a Saturday, that's 3,000 calories that I need. And then I add in, I forget what I did. I think if I add in the thermal effect of food, so I need 3,000 calories just to cover my basal metabolic rate, which you can calculate online if you just Google search basal metabolic rate calculator. Based on your age, height, weight, a bunch of stuff, gender, it'll tell you like kind of what your basal metabolic rate is. So for me, that's 1,700 calories. So if I were eating a 2,000 calorie diet and it takes me 1,700 calories to exist, how long am I going to exist for with 1,700 calories, with 2,000 calories? Not very long. I'm going to have a huge caloric deficit and I'm going to evaporate. So basal metabolic rate plus that, or plus my exercise is 3,000 calories. If I have to eat 3,000 calories, I know I have to add an extra 25% because that's how much I'm burning through non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And then I've got to add the thermal cost of my food, which is the energy that's in my food that doesn't make it to me because I had to break it down. Go watch my other talk. It's a little confusing. It's fine. If this is my day, 4-mile run, 18 holes of golf, I have to eat 4,100 calories to do nothing, to stay the same. If I want to lose weight, I can eat a little bit less calories. If I want to gain weight, I got to eat more calories. How many people would have a heart attack if their doctor told them to eat 4,000 calories a day? Right. But it makes sense when we look at it from a physiological standpoint. So if we're in a caloric deficit, that's going to create a stress on our body. If our adrenal glands can handle the stress, it's fine. If they can't, you're in trouble. Eat more food. End of story. Intermittent fasting. Tons of benefits. There's a ton of benefits of fasting. That's not really an argued concept, right? But what's the risk of intermittent fasting? Is an increased stress response. So can we use this to modulate our stress response? Probably, right? So let's go back to my friend here, who is here. This is my friend who works out. She works out first thing in the morning, and she doesn't eat breakfast. She doesn't eat till lunch. So what is she doing first thing in the morning? Exercising to spike her cortisol, and she's fasting, which also spikes her cortisol. Then she eats lunch, and her cortisol shoots down. So we talked about how we can not exercise here. We can exercise here. We can do some exercise snacks here. What else could we do to help her out? And this is what a lot of women should do. Eat breakfast. If you're going to do intermittent fasting, do it in the evening. Eat breakfast, eat lunch, don't eat dinner. Now we're increasing that cortisol response in the evening. Don't do that if your cortisol's through the roof in the evening. Doesn't make sense. You've got to know where your cortisol levels are at. But when you do, there's a lot of really powerful tools that you can use to start manipulating these things. All right, how about sleep? How many people think that sleep is good for you? Good answer. Our body heals when we're sleeping. How well do you think your body's going to heal if you're not sleeping? Not well. So we've got to protect our sleep at all costs. So how can we set ourselves up to protect our sleep at all costs? Well, we know stress plays a major role in sleep. So cortisol is the hormone that we've talked about all day long. Increases in the morning, comes down at night. Who knows what the opposite of cortisol is? Melatonin. So this is what that looks like. Cortisol is our white line, increases in the morning, peaks, slowly comes back down, you fall asleep. Melatonin, suppressed all day long, increases in the evening, helps you fall asleep. How many people know what suppresses melatonin production? It's not cortisol. What was it? Yes. Blue light suppresses cortisol, or suppresses melatonin production. Blue light naturally produced by the sun. Everybody has heard of blue light blocking glasses, obviously. You wear those at night to block blue light. The reason is blue light on the back of the retina stimulates your body to suppress cortisol production, or melatonin production. Blue light goes away, melatonin production comes up, we get tired, we fall asleep. So one of the big things is going to be controlling our circadian rhythm through light exposure, or not negatively affecting our circadian rhythm because of light exposure. So our circadian clock is about 24 hours and 15 minutes, which means that if our circadian clock just ran at 24 hours and 15 minutes in a year, we're going to be awake in the middle of the night and sleeping during the day. So what is it do we think that sets our clock? Light. Yeah, so light exposure sets our clock. This is why it's very, very difficult to be healthy if you have to work third shift, because you have no light exposure to set your clock. So there's 4 different types of light, 3.5 different types of light. We have low angle tangential light that comes first thing in the morning as the sun rises and as the sun sets. And then we've got high in the sky light all day long. And then we've got no light, which is nighttime. All 4 of those are super important. So the low level light, low sun angle light, first 45 minutes, last 45 minutes of the day, that sets your clock. So waking up, looking at the sunrise, getting exposure to that first 45 minutes, that'll shift your clock about an hour forward. And what happens is when we look at the sunset then resets your clock and shifts it about an hour afterwards. So if we're someone who wakes up and doesn't ever look at the morning sun, or someone who works all the way until it's dark outside, then we're not getting those 2 settings of our circadian clock. And then our light in our body is going to respond to the amount of light. Light is cumulative. Light's just photons. It's just energy that hits your eyes. And the amount of light that you get all day long is cumulative. How many people have gone to the beach or spent all day outside and you get home and you fall asleep at 8 o'clock at night? Yeah, because there's a ton of really bright light reflecting off the water, reflecting off the sand, and you're just wiped out because you got a ton of energy from the light all day long. People who stay inside all day long, this light, there's nowhere near as much light as there is from the sun. Why do you think we get things like seasonal affective disorder up north when the days are really short, so we're getting less light, it's really cloudy, we're not getting as much energy coming through the clouds, and it starts to have really negative impacts on our mood, affects our sleep, we feel tired a lot more. So light's really important. And then the other thing that I just threw in here is just night owls versus early birds. There's some cool genetic stuff coming out that says that whether or not you are a morning person or a night person can be genetically determined, and trying to force yourself to be the other type of person throws you out. So unfortunately, society is set up to favor early birds and demonize night owls. That's the unfortunate truth about the way it is. So unfortunately, a lot of people make themselves sick because they're a night owl and they try to be a morning owl so they can make it to their 9 to 5, get through the day. But if that's not how your genes are trying to express life or whatever, you're going to be fighting against that your whole life. So if you feel like you're a night owl, don't let society like force you to be an early bird to the extent that you can. Okay, so nocturnal light has been shown to alter the circadian rhythms in sleep in humans. On the other hand, light can also be used as an effective and non-invasive therapeutic option with little to no side effects to improve sleep, mood, and general well-being. So we're saying two really important things there. Number one, light at night can mess you up. Number two, we can use light therapeutically to help support normal stress responses and normal sleep. I got to wrap this up. Blue light suppresses melatonin for about twice as long as green light, which is just they're using green light as the control as normal light. So blue light suppresses our melatonin and it shifts our circadian rhythm by twice as much. So blue light exposure at night pushes our circadian rhythm back 3 hours. Meaning if you're trying to fall asleep at 8 and you've got a ton of blue light exposure, now your body is trying to fall asleep at 11. That's not very helpful if you're trying to wake up and get normal sleep and have your body heal. So how do we use light to our benefit? Well, we can avoid excessive blue light exposure during the day and at night. I did not mean to write during the day. Wear blue light blocking glasses at night. Anybody have blue light blocking glasses? Anybody wear them all day long? Yeah? All right. I wear contacts, but my glasses that I wear are blue light blocking glasses. And if I wear them during the day, I actually feel like groggier. And the reason for that is because they're blocking blue light. Blue light suppresses melatonin. Melatonin should be low during the day. So if you're wearing blue light blocking lenses all day long, that can actually affect your circadian rhythm in a negative way. So we need blue light exposure during the day in normal amounts, aka from the sun, not from staring at your phone all day long. Normal blue light exposure amounts during the day and then avoid it at night. What does that look like? Well, wearing blue light blocking lenses, not holding phones up to your face. This type of light is not going to affect you that much, but some people are more sensitive to it. So there are people who will actually screw red light bulbs into certain lights in their house. And when the sun goes down, the red lights turn on. It's a little bit extreme. Guy whose podcast I listen to takes red lights with him to hotels and he puts his red lights in his hotels. I'm not going to do it, but it all depends on kind of what your goals are, right? And also where you're at in your life. So those are all things that we can do. Install red lights in the bedroom. I do have amber colored light bulbs in the nightstands. So when we go into the bedroom at night, I try to turn the overhead lights off and only use the amber light stand night lights. And then the ceiling fan light, which is usually the light that turns on, that's also, it's not a super bright light. Because I feel like I can't fall asleep quick. If I walk into the bedroom and it's got a ton of lights on, I just don't feel like I'm getting myself ready for bed. So the other thing we can do is set our clock is get exposure to that low angle sunlight in the morning and at night. First light, last light, go for a walk. Just go do it. Or just sit on your back porch and watch the sunrise. There's a reason that we feel better when we watch the sunrise. It's not just an emotional thing. It kind of is, but there's a physiological response that happens in the body with that type of sunlight. Very beneficial. Get plenty of sunshine in the middle of the day. Get outside. I always, not always, but when I can, I go out for a walk at lunch and I try to get as much sunlight into my eyes as possible. One of the other things that I don't do in the morning is I don't wear my sunglasses when I drive to the office. It's blocking light. Why would I want to block light when I need the light to wake me up in the morning? So think about that. I just drop the visor down for the 1 mile that I drive east, turn it to the side, and then I'm fine. So those are things a lot of people just out of habit. The sun's out, you throw your glasses on. But if you're trying to not be super tired when you get to the office, why would you block that light from your eyes when it's going to help wake you up? But things we don't think about. The other thing when it comes to sleep is you have to be very, very diligent about protecting your sleep. It's the most important thing our bodies do is sleep and rest. So we've got to protect that. So we've got to use light to our advantage during the day, meaning that part of me protecting my sleep is what I do first thing in the morning when I wake up. Setting my circadian clock, getting exposure to the sun. If we've waited till we're going to bed, it's too late. Get plenty of exercise during the day. Avoiding meals really close to bedtime. Keep TVs and phones out of the bedroom. We were really wanting to put a TV in our bedroom, and I almost in the car on the way to the store to buy one, and we decided we're not going to do that because if we have a TV in the bedroom, every time we walk into the bedroom, my brain is thinking TV. My brain is not thinking bed. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they go and they watch TV, they're bombarding their eyes with blue light, and now their brain is getting excited thinking that I'm going to go watch TV It's not preparing for bed. So having a wind down routine that actually prepares your mind for bed is super important also, because you start doing it, you turn the lights down low, you brush your teeth, whatever, get a book. Your brain is instantly thinking, okay, I'm starting my bedtime routine. I'm getting ready for bed. Your brain is starting that process in a positive way, preparing you for bedtime. And then I had to throw it in there, just avoid coffee late in the day. I could drink coffee and fall asleep. All right, this is how men handle stress versus women. She's smiling in the cold plunge. I feel like I'm about to die. I figured I would throw that in there. She's probably not happy about that, whatever. Got Mr. Ducky to make us happier. So cold plunging, awesome. I threw it in at the end of my last talk, and everybody asked me 1,000 questions about it. So I figured I'd put it in here also. This is another thing that we can utilize to our benefit, because cold plunging is, again, an acute stress response. Acute stress response spikes our cortisol. What happens after that, though, is our cortisol is actually going to drop down, and we're going to reset at a lower level. So for people who are super stressed out, it can force your body into really crashing, no cortisol. We can use it to help force the body to kind of produce cortisol. It's also going to cause a norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are our other two stress hormones. It's going to cause those to increase as well. Elevate mood, increase blood circulation, increase bound fat production, which increases your basal metabolic rate, helps you lose fat without working out. Redirects blood flow to the internal organs. It's one of very few things that will actually force blood into your brain. Helps with mental clarity, alertness, energy, mood. It's awesome. People who cold plunge, I feel the best when I cold plunge on a regular basis. I know a couple people just got one. You guys feel better doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sucks.
Like super like fight or flight or stress that cold plunging is bad. Your body's already in a state of like.
So what happens is after you get out of the cold plunge, your cortisol level is going to drop. So it's like a reset almost. And it's really cool. So you should cold plunge ideally in the morning. Because of my schedule and the fact that I don't have a nice cold plunge, I have to put ice in it, which means I have to stop at the store to get ice. So I do it usually after work. It makes me feel very calm, I feel like. So even if I've had a bad day, Rachel can attest to this too. If we come home and we're pissed off or angry or stressed or whatever, you get in the cold plunge, within 5 minutes, you feel great. Now, what's the other thing about a cold plunge? How many people have been in the cold plunge? How many things can you do or think about while you're in the cold plunge? 1, breathing. Forces you to breathe. You can't do anything else. So again, it's forced meditation, forced breath work. So someone like this, normal stress response, we can cold plunge whenever. Someone who's super high, probably want to cold plunge in the morning, bring that cortisol level up, reset it, bring it a little bit lower. And a lot of these things, so your body's always going to adapt and respond. There's things like adaptogenic herbs that can, if you're low, they can bring you up. If you're high, they can bring you down. So cold plunging will create a cortisol spike, but it will also help to normalize your cortisol levels. So it's not to say that the spike is bad if you're high, or if you can't produce anything, it's going to keep you low, whatever. It's adaptogenic in the sense that it's going to help normalize you and hold you at that physiological level. Someone like this, cold plunge, first thing in the morning, could probably also cold plunge in the afternoon. This is where you can use it to manipulate your physiology. No one said you can't do it twice, right? Why can't you do it twice? Someone like this, fun in the morning, crash in the afternoon, jump in the cold plunge at lunch, yes. So there's 2 things to that. There's physiological benefits to cold plunging, and there's psychological benefits to cold plunging. The physiological benefit is the cold water forces your body to have a response. The psychological benefit is your brain has a response. So it's not cold enough to create a physiological response within your body. In Florida, we go up north. I was up in Ohio over the weekend. I did that because I was really tired and wanted to wake up. And I felt amazing afterwards, and the water was freezing cold. In Florida, it doesn't get cold enough to do that. But the other piece of it is stepping outside your comfort zone and doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable. If you get anxiety thinking about stepping back into the cold water, that means that you just did something that you felt uncomfortable with, and you are now elevating your own personal level. So it's personal growth. So it can help you, because doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable helps you grow. So there is benefit. It's not the same, not the total benefit, but if you do it and you like it, keep doing it. All right, so final thoughts here. Stress is cumulative. It's not the one thing that you're doing that's going to fix all your problems, and it's not the one thing you did that caused all of them. It's looking at the whole picture. Give yourself the space and the time to heal. You didn't get here overnight. You're not going to fix yourself overnight. So just know that it will take space and time to heal. It's going to be slower if you're still have all these stresses on you. So the more stress you can reduce from your body and the more things that you can do to help modulate that stress response, the faster you're going to get better. If you can only start with one thing, start with one thing. It's better than doing nothing, right? So start where you're at. A lot of it's emotional stress. Have hard conversations. Do hard things. If there's people in your life that are causing the stress, talk to them. Get away from them. It's not always easy. Sometimes you have to quit your job. Sometimes you have to move. Sometimes you have to break up with someone. But you have to put yourself first. And if that's what needs to happen, evaluate that within your life and make that decision. Make changes slowly over time so you don't get overwhelmed. Yeah, you could go implement every single thing I just talked about, but how long is that going to last? So let's make changes at a timeline that is comfortable for you. The other thing I say is focus on what you can add in instead of taking away. Adding something is a reward. Taking something away is a punishment. If you have to focus on taking 1,000 things away, it's going to feel harder than if you focus on adding things in. So just switching the mindset a little bit. The last thing to remember is you got this. So here's all the ways that you can stay connected with us. QR codes for all that. Sorry that went a little bit long. Anybody have questions? No? All right, everybody ready to go get dinner?